Welcome into the PFN Bengals podcast. I am Dallas Robinson. He is Jay Morrison. Jay, the Bengals didn't play this week. The Bengals got a week off. You kind of got a week off. We all kind of got a week off. Week didn't go that well, though, if you're a Bengals fan. All the other AFC North teams won. I think if you're a Bengals fan, you're kind of hoping it would go the other way. We've seen that in the past and prior years that on Bengals buys, it's been a good week for the Bengals. This was not one of them. The Bengals looked incredible. The Browns pulled out a win. The Steelers pulled out a win. But we're looking at the rest of the season here, Jay, and where the Bengals sit. We've got quite a few things we want to get into today. We're going to talk about where the Bengals stand in the AFC North. We're going to go over the trade deadline. We've got that coming up here next week. We've got a little game we're going to play for you about the rest of the Bengals season. And then, of course, we'll look at the 49ers game coming up this Sunday. But, Jay, I think, is there anything you want to talk about right off the top? Where the Bengals stand? I think if you look at the AFC North, all those teams look pretty good on Sunday, especially the Ravens, who I think looked like one of the NFL's maybe dominant teams in taking down the Detroit Lions in a really dominant effort. Does this change where you kind of see the Bengals moving forward after you saw how those other AFC North teams played on Sunday?
A little bit, but the Baltimore one, not so much. I did pick Detroit to win that game. I just thought that the Ravens were ripe for an upset there. The thing with the Ravens, they're playing well, and I think we all expect that. It's just you never know when that Lamar injury is right around the corner. He's had trouble finishing seasons. I think that team is not quite the same. The defense is really good, but it's not going to be the same. If Lamar stays healthy, they are going to be a hard team to catch. The Cleveland game, there are a lot of people upset with the officiating in that game. I think per capita it was probably in Cincinnati because the Bengals needed some of those teams to lose. And, Pittsburgh handles business out in L.A. So, not ideal, never ideal when everybody else in the division wins when you're off, but especially when you've got a slow start to make up for. And we're talking about the only division in the NFL where every team is at least 500. The Bengals are in the basement at 500. Everyone knows they got a lot of climbing to do to overcome that slow start, but they could play really well. They could win the rest of their games and still maybe not win the division. It's just that Baltimore has that kind of potential to run the table. Cleveland, if they can get Deshaun Watson back to anything competent with the way that defense plays, and I think, Pittsburgh still has offensive challenges, but I do like Kenny Pickett. I can see that offense starting to kind of build something. And again, they've got a terrific defense that can help them win games if the offense is off. So it was not an ideal Sunday, and it makes for an even steeper climb the rest of the way.
Yeah, definitely. I think the Deshaun Watson situation is so weird, right? The fact that he didn't play for a few weeks, came back in for like 9 plays, took another big hit, could have come back into the game, was clear to come back into the game, but didn't. It's such a weird situation, and it almost makes it a little hard to evaluate the Browns. Obviously a defense playing at a historic rate, but if PJ Walker's the quarterback, they're obviously not as intimidating of a team as if they had Deshaun Watson from 2 or 3 years ago.
Right.
I think if you look at the AFC North, though, man, the Ravens look good. I think that passing attack, I think, finally came together under Todd Monken, and the defense. Mike McDonald is going to be a head coach next year, the Ravens defensive coordinator. That was an incredible performance. I think it puts the Bengals in a position where you kind of look and see how they match up against those other teams, how they match up against the other AFC teams conference-wide. And I think that can kind of transition us into the trade deadline, which comes up next week. I don't know if the Bengals are going to make a move or not. Looking at historically, if you went by what the Bengals have done over their history, they're probably not going to make a move. It's not something they do. We've heard Duke Tobin and Mike Brown and Zach Taylor talk about this, that they really value those draft picks, even those late round draft picks. But that doesn't mean there aren't spots on this roster that I think could be augmented if the Bengals wanted to do it. But Jay, we've talked about it on this show before. The idea of the Bengals going out and making a move, it's probably a pipe dream. I think you'd agree with that. But if they wanted to, there are spots they could upgrade on this roster.
Yeah, absolutely. Running back would be one. It makes the most sense in the world to bring Samaje Perine back. I don't know where Samaje's mind is in that. It doesn't seem like Denver would be opposed to trading him. They're not using him at all. But I just wonder, the Bengals offered Samaje the same amount that Denver did, and he wanted to go to Denver. And, was it an issue of him being tired of being in Joe Mixon's shadow? He's been behind him since Oklahoma. So maybe he just wanted to break free from that. Maybe he was promised something more than he got in Denver, and he's upset with Denver and would like to come back. I don't know where that stands. The bigger issue is the Bengals don't like to trade. They don't like to acquire guys at the trade deadline. They don't like to trade at the deadline period. You look at the 4 most recent trade deadline deals in team history, and I know 3 of them, the last 3 were malcontents that wanted out and kind of forced the Bengals' hands. And we're talking about Carlos Dunlap, Carson Palmer in 2011, and then Ricky Hundley all the way back to the 1980s. And then before that, it was Dan Ross in 85. I do not know what the situation was with Dan Ross, but they shipped him out midseason for a 4th-round pick. And that's it. That's all we're talking about. How about this? When do you think was the last time the Bengals acquired a player in season? I'm not talking about September, early September, right after cutdown day. I'm closer, let's just say after October 1st. When was the last time the Bengals acquired a player in season?
I honestly have no idea, because I was trying to find this. I could not find a guy. Most of the trades they've done that I could remember were like right before the season, maybe. I honestly have no idea like who the last guy would have been after October.
1972.
Oh my God.
Future Hall of Famer Charlie Joyner, which was, a good trade to pick him up.
Interesting.
Yes.
Yeah.
But that trade was made on November 1st, 1972. So this year's trade deadline will be almost 51 years to the day since the last time they went out and got some help at the trade deadline. It just, we've seen this team kind of change the way they do things on social media, ticket wise. There's so many new, fresh elements to the organization, but that bedrock principle of not giving up draft picks, I don't think it's going to go anywhere. Duke is totally bought into it. It's been that way since he's been here, and it's obviously was that way all the way back way before Duke was here. I get where they're coming from, where you're paying Burrow all this money and Orlando Brown and all the guys on defense, and Jamar Chase is going to get a huge contract. They need those draft picks. That's how you are going to sustain success and keep plugging in key spots in the roster by drafting well the way they have. But I mean, you're talking about what, a late round pick swap, like a 6th for a 7th or a 7th for a 6th, and bring a guy like Pirine back that could be a difference maker. I think that if anything happens, that would probably be it. Tight end would be the other area. I just don't know how many tight ends are available out there. Someone that's going to give you a significant upgrade. I mean, I know Irv Smith's not producing much right now, but if you're going to get someone that is guaranteed to bring you more, it's going to cost you a lot more in terms of a pick than like a Pirine would cost. So I just don't see them doing that. I kind of think, yes, Irv hasn't been great, but a lot of it's because you're not designing an offense with Irv Smith as your first read. And Joe Burrow was throwing to the first read so often early in the season because he was limited with the cap. He's just trying to get rid of the ball as soon as possible. Now that is becoming less of an issue, or maybe even a non-issue, then maybe you see Irv up the seam as the 2nd, the 3rd read, and Burrow gets to him and he finds a mismatch and hits it. So I think the Bengals are going to be patient with this. I would put running back as way more likely a target to go get than tight end, but I still think running back's way down, like probably a 10% chance they go out and get one.
If that. Yeah, I think, and I get what you're saying, and I get where the Bengals are coming from too, in terms of not wanting to give up these picks. And I guess I would just play devil's advocate, right? If I were talking to the Bengals and say, yeah, I understand you have a lot of big contracts that you've already paid, that you have coming up with Jamar Chase, and if you want to keep T. Higgins, but I think that's why you do want to make these trades, because you can make these little improvements on the margins, right? I think that's an area where you have to kind of find other ways to bring in talent. And it's maybe proven's the wrong word to use, but these are NFL veterans, right? These are not 6th and 7th round picks. Maybe a year from now, 2 years from now, that have a 5%, 10% chance of working out. Samaje Perine isn't an all pro, but he could play a role for this team. Isn't that better than a 6th round pick in 2025 that has a 5 or 10% chance of working out at some point? I don't know. I think you could make that argument. And I think you see other contending teams around the NFL make these kind of deals. where you can understand why it's kind of frustrating for Bengals fans that they don't really get involved. You saw the Eagles just trade for Kevin Byard. They had a clear weakness at safety, and they went out and traded, I think it was a fifth, a sixth, and Terrell Edmonds for Kevin Byard. I mean, that is an absolute steal of a deal. He's not making that much money either. You've seen the Chiefs go out and reunite with Mecole Hardman. You've seen the San Francisco 49ers, who the Bengals are going to play, go out and get Randy Gregory from the Broncos. Just these little kind of pieces that maybe when the season progresses and we get into the playoffs, that these guys can play a role, and it didn't cost these teams very much at all. So I think you're right. It's when the price is a pick swap in 2025, I think the Bengals are a little behind the times on this in terms of adding players via trade when the cost is so low. I do think it's something they can consider. Do I think they will? No, I don't. I really don't. You're right that they've changed their stripes in a lot of ways, but I just don't think it's going to happen this year. Perine would be the guy. There's never been a more perfect trade candidate for the Bengals that I could remember than Samaje Perine. And you're right. He didn't want to come back here at the time, but he's on a Broncos team that's going nowhere. He's third on the running back depth chart. He could come back here to a Bengals team that he knows that could make the playoffs, that has the talent to make that sort of run. And he would instantly have a role on this team. Like, no question, he would be the third down passing down back. I think that would be an excellent target for the Bengals. I don't think it's going to happen. I think the other obvious one is maybe Hayden Hurst from the Panthers, bringing him back. Again, another team that's going nowhere in a position that the Bengals could use an improvement. But Hayden Hurst has almost $6 million guaranteed next year from the Panthers. Yeah. That's the reason he went to Carolina, didn't come back here. Mm-hmm. I don't think the Bengals want to pay that to a guy who's 30, 31 years old. I mean, that's the reason they let him leave. So I don't know. I think if the Bengals could trade like a 2030 pick, if that was an option, maybe they'd be interested in that. Something they wouldn't even have to think about that far down the line. But I'm right there with you. I think the odds of something happening in the next week are slim to none for the Bengals. And, as much as I'd like to see them make a move or think that would improve, I just don't think it's going to happen.
Yeah, and you think about it with all these big contracts that they're paying now and the ones coming up, they are going to be non-factors in free agency for the next few years. So you're going to have guys walk. T. Higgins could walk. Yeah. I mean, you're going to be getting more draft picks even than what you already think you have now. You're probably going to be getting 2 comp picks next year. So it's, I could see if the cost is so minimal and you can make a substantial upgrade to the roster, I don't know why they wouldn't do it. But other than it's just the way they've never done it. And I don't know that that's their main logic, but that's what it looks like from the outside where, hey, we've never done it this way. And oh, by the way, it's not like this team is winning double-digit wins every single season and has this just incredible success and recipe for it. I mean, until you win a Lombardi trophy, maybe be willing to mix things up and try some new things. And it's not gonna set you back. Like you look at some of these other deals and it can kill you think about what the 49ers did for Trey Lance, where he totally bombed. If Brock Purdy didn't turn into Brock Purdy, that might have got the coach Shanahan and Lynch fired. Totally. These things, when you make a big swing, it can have major repercussions. But what we're talking about, what happens if Perine comes here and doesn't work out and you lose a pick swap in 2025?
Yeah, you drop 30 spots in the 7th round or whatever. It doesn't matter. It just does not matter. Yeah. I totally agree. But at the end of the day, I don't think any of our arguments are going to sway the Bengals. I don't think anything's going to happen. Yeah. So Bengals fans, you can rest easy next Tuesday. I don't think you'll need to tune in leading up to 4:00 because they're probably not going to do anything, unfortunately. All right, let's get into a little game we have planned for today. Jay, this is a Jay Morrison creation. This is a Jay Morrison special. We're going to go through a couple different categories here. 5 things that we think are the most likely to least likely to happen for the Bengals this year. And then the next category we're going to do is what happens first. We've got 5 more topics for that. Jay, should we list off the topics in advance and then rank, or just
and then people can kind of think along with how they would rank them
for sure. All right, so we have 4 most likely to happen. Bengals make the playoffs. Bengals miss the playoffs. Evan McPherson ties or breaks his field goal record of 59 yards. Someone other than Jamar Chase leads the team in the triple crown of targets, receptions, and yards in any given game. or 2 players finish with double-digit sacks for the season. So we're going to rank those 1 to 5 in the order that we think they are most likely to happen this season. I think should we start with number 5, Jay, and work our way up? What do you have for number 5?
Yeah, that works. For number 5, I've got multiple players with 10 plus sacks. I think it's a lock that Trey Hendrickson's going to get there. But then you got BJ Hill with 3 and Sam Hubbard with 3. So one of those guys is going to need 7 over the next 11 games. That might be a bit much to ask. I went back and looked. It's only happened twice in franchise history where multiple guys had 10 plus sacks. And that was in 2015 and 2012. So it just, that seems like a long shot. Like I said, Trey, the reason I put that one in there is because Trey is locked to get to 10.
Trey's almost there,
Yeah, can somebody else get there? But I think that's asking a lot.
Yeah, I had that as number 5 as well. Like you said, I think Trey is basically there. He could get there in the very near future. But there's just no one else who's really even close. I think coming into the season, we could have thought that there were other guys who could have been there, Hubbard or maybe even a guy like Joseph Osai. Maybe we could have thought, but he was injured early on in the preseason, hasn't really contributed that much this year. So there's just no other realistic candidate, I think, to get there, despite Trey basically being a lock. So yeah, I had that number 5. And number 4, I hate to say it, but I had Bengals make the playoffs at number 4. I do think they can get there. I think they have the talent. I think they have all the pieces that they've had in recent seasons, for the most part, that got them to the playoffs and beyond. But, I'm a numbers guy, and I'm looking at the New York Times playoff odds, and they've got the Bengals at 30%. And even if I think it's a little higher than that in my mind, which I do, I'm not going to bump it up that much higher. I'm not smarter than the New York Times projection model. I'm not going to say that. So I've got that number 4. Jay, do you have a similar pick, or what do you have at number 4?
No, I actually went the other way. I put missed playoffs number 4. They have a track record. They have started slow the last 2 years and turned it on after the bye. And you can't always count on flipping that switch, but I think there are similarities to what happened in years past to what's happened this year. And it starts with Joe Burrow not being healthy to start the year, and that sets you back. And then he eventually gets back to being himself, and things kind of take off. They are not reluctant to make changes mid-season. Every team self-scouts at the bye, and then you come up with a tweak here or there. But the Bengals have been willing to make major changes, and I don't know that we're going to see that, but it'll be interesting to see if there is a noticeable difference of how they operate. They've already said they're going to go under center more, and it's just, the other thing is, I don't want to say it's by design because they're not trying to start slow.
Yeah.
But the country club atmosphere in the offseason, OTAs, training camps, not super physical. It's all done with the point of keeping these guys fresh and having them playing their best football down the stretch. So if you're going to weigh, do we want to start fast or do we want to finish fast? You're always going to pick finishing fast. And it's worked so far. It's not, like I said, it's not a lock that it's going to happen again this year. But you kind of trust the track record here that they found a way to fix things at this point in the season and really hit the ground running coming out of their break. So until they prove they can't do it, I'm going to lean on it's going to happen again.
All right, you're a half glass full guy. I'm a half glass empty guy. We've established that. That's fine. What do you have at number 3? What do you have as the third most likely of these 5 categories to happen?
Yeah, so that I had making the playoffs at 3. That's okay. Yeah, so
they're pretty close together.
Yeah, I had those 2 back to back.
Okay, I put Evan McPherson breaking or tying his 59-yard field goal record right in the middle of those 2, and I put Bengals miss the playoffs at number 2. I think McPherson could obviously hit a field goal that long. I think it's just a question of whether it will be attempted, because that's right in kind of a part of the field where the Bengals should be going for a lot of fourth downs in that situation. And then, I had Bengals miss playoffs at number 2. New York Times has it at 70% to make the playoffs. Like I said, I think it's, in my mind, probably a little lower. And I agree with what you said. I want to believe, Jay. I want to believe in this team. And I do believe in this team. I just think the AFC is an incredibly difficult conference. AFC North is an incredibly difficult division. And the Bengals put themselves in a hole. So even if I think it's a little better than 30% they're going to make the playoffs, am I over 50%? It's probably right around there, but it's tough. I think it's going to be a difficult difficult run, and we'll get into it a little bit. How the schedule that the Bengals have coming up, it is just such an absolute gauntlet. Zach Taylor used that same word that we've been using. So at number one, what do you have for the most likely outcome of these five?
Obviously, the same as you. I had Chase because I went McPherson at 2. That is a lot to ask, but the Bengals are so aggressive when they're going to get the third quarter kickoff. They are so aggressive and saving time, even if the other team's driving, and you would think the other team would be the one calling the timeouts. They call timeouts just to get some semblance of an opportunity at the end of the half. And I think that's where you saw he had I think it was a 58-yarder at Denver. It was on, they got the kickoff, made one pass, kicked it. So I think he's going to get an opportunity. Whether he makes it or not, I don't know, but I think he'll get a shot to kick one of at least 59 here before the end of the year. And I wouldn't bet against him. He's pretty good. The Chase thing, I went back and looked since he came back from the hip injury last year, 11 games, he's led the Bengals in all 3 categories in 8 of those 11 games. So for somebody else to not just unseat him from one of them, but to unseat him from all 3, that's going to take a lot. It maybe if Jamar gets nicked and he misses a game, even then it's not guaranteed. It's probably going to be more of a spread. You're not going to have that one guy be the guy.
I think it's a bet on. It's like a bet on T. Higgins. It's a bet on him. He's been so quiet. What happened
in week 2.
Exactly. He's been, he's dealing with an injury. He's been banged up. He's been quiet, but you feel like that's coming. That's coming. There's just going to be that game that's like the T game, and I think that could be the scenario where he kind of takes over for Chase for one game. I don't think that's out of the question.
Yeah, because we saw it against the Ravens, and I think he's gonna get more comfortable with the rib injury that he's gonna have to play through, and there's just always a chance another team just says we're not gonna let Jamar beat us. You guys might beat us, but it's not gonna be Jamar, and they totally sell out and stop him. And there isn't enough other options there for Burrow to lean on somebody for a game.
Yeah, definitely, I agree. Okay, what happens first for the Bengals this season? We've got 5 more. Number 1, Bengals have a 100-yard rusher. And some of these things have happened before. So we're just what happens next
from this point on.
From this point on. So Bengals have had a 100-yard rusher. Bengals score more than 10 points in a quarter, which they have not done for 31 straight quarters, which is just incredible. Bengals score a defensive or special teams touchdown, which we've seen a couple times this season. Bengals get a road win, or Bengals suffer a home loss. So, Jay, what do you have at number 5 for... So I guess what would happen last?
Yeah, I went with the defensive and special teams touchdowns, even though you mentioned they've got one of each already, but those are pretty rare. So I think banking on that, I'm not willing to do that. I wouldn't be surprised if they get another one, but even Cam's pick 6 against Arizona, that was the Bengals' first since 2017. It's just, I'm sorry, no, Mike Hilton had one, but it's just not something that you see very often. And they don't, for whatever reason, Jermaine Pratt has a knack for getting the ball out, but they don't force a lot of fumbles. And then Charlie Jones dealing with the thumb injury, he'll be back in a couple games. So maybe he gets loose on another one, but just to count on that, I'm going to put that one last. Okay.
That's a good argument. I have that one a little bit higher. Yeah. You actually might have swayed me with that argument. Maybe I'm feeling bad about these rankings now, but I actually have as my last one as a home loss. I feel pretty good about the slate coming out, the home slate at least. Obviously, that they play the Bills in Week 9 at home, so you can see how I'm leaning towards that game. But I think there are tougher games for the Bengals coming up on the road. And I really do think they match up. They got Buffalo in Week 9, Houston in Week 10 at home, Pittsburgh at Week 12, Indy in Week 14, Minnesota Week 15. I think they match up well with all those teams, and we can get into more of those games as they come. But I have that as last. I really do think they'll take care of business at home. For number 4, I have a 100-yard rusher.
Same.
I just the rushing offense has been so bad. It's just been so bad, and they're playing teams that have really good run defenses, or at least above average run defenses coming up. Joe Mixon's looked okay at times, but it's just not there consistently, and they have no one else who can run the ball. And the offensive line is not run blocking to the point where they need to be. Like you said, maybe they're going to do more under center stuff and really try and get that going, and maybe they'll make it a point to get to 100 yards just to send a message. But just on effort alone, I don't think it's going to happen anytime soon.
I mean, last year it took them playing a terrible Carolina team for Joe Mixon to have that huge game. I don't see a dog on the schedule like that this year. So I'm with you. That's my number 4 is the 100-yard rushing game. They just, I don't know. I think they can get better at running the ball, but I don't think you're going to see Mixon run for 100.
No, definitely not. What'd you have at number 3?
I had the home loss at 3.
Okay.
Who knows? If Buffalo loses this week, they could be a really in a desperate spot when they come in on Sunday Night Football. Houston is just a weird, sneaky team. And then even if it gets to it, I mean, you still have their kryptonite coming to Cincinnati and the Cleveland Browns. It's not till the finale, but that I had that one at 3rd. I think a road win will happen before a home loss.
Yeah, I had road win at 3rd. I think that they can win on the road. I will get into the 49ers game. I don't want to give away my bet, but I don't know if it's going to happen this week, but I think a road win could happen at some point. Baltimore in week 11, we just saw it's hard to look at these games too far in advance, right? Because you don't know what's going to happen. You don't know who's going to be injured. We're basing so much off recency bias, but so I think I had road win at number 3. I actually had Bengals defensive special teams touchdown at number 2. And let me explain my reasoning. They're playing the Buffalo Bills next week. Have you seen Josh Allen play? He's not exactly comfortable or careful with the ball. And you're probably right. You looked at the numbers. You looked at it historically, how rare this is. You're probably right. I accept that. But I'd like to think that somebody on this defense can pick off Josh Allen and take one back to the house next week. Is it going to happen? Probably not. I'm probably wish casting that, but I could see it. What do you have at number 2?
Well, the problem with Josh Allen is he takes chances on deep balls, and those don't get returned a lot. And when they get on the plus side of the field, he tries to force it in on 3rd downs as opposed to just taking the sack and kicking the field goal. That's where a lot of his pick sixes come from, or a lot of his interceptions come from. But yeah, I do think the Bengals will get a couple turnovers in that game. Yes. My number 1 was 10 points in a quarter. I always have the philosophy you never bet against the trend, and it is pretty crazy that they've gone 31 straight quarters without scoring more than 10. But it's something that circumstance can dictate even more so than the offense getting more explosive. I mean, you could have 1st and goal when you flip from the 1st to the 2nd quarter, and you could score a touchdown on the first play of the 2nd quarter. Then you're going to get 2 or 3 more possessions. I just think the dam's about to break for this offense. And they're going to start scoring points. They're going to start putting up more yards. Burrow's healthy, and not sure it comes in San Francisco, but I don't think it's going to be too much longer before we see them score 10 or more than 10 in a quarter.
Yeah, that's what I had number 1 too. It just feels like it has to happen, right? Like how much longer could this go on? Like it has to. With this offense, with this set of offensive skill position players, with Joe Burrow under center, fully healthy, calf strain in the past, I feel like this has to happen. I don't know if it's going to happen this week. It very well could, but at some point soon it's going to have to happen. So that's how we see the season. I think, both relatively optimistic, maybe me a little less optimistic, but I think we both believe that this team can get it going. I think that's clear. I mean, from this is that we think that the underlying talent is there. Now, this is an absolute gauntlet of a schedule the Bengals are facing coming up. Zach Taylor talked about it yesterday. It's almost hard to believe when you look at the schedule how difficult it is and how many tough games are on here. And the thing is, the Bengals already failed their easy part of their schedule. Whether that was just because of Burrow's injury or not, we can debate. But they put themselves in a hole to the point where they're going to have to beat some really good teams. The 49ers are coming up this week. Buffalo after that. Houston has played well. We talked about Baltimore in these other division games. Jacksonville. Even a team like the Vikings we just saw last night knock off the 49ers. I don't think there's a team on the rest of the Bengals schedule, Jay, I look at and say, that's a win. That's a clear win. I think every game at least could be something of a struggle.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. This happens every year where you look at the schedule when it first comes out and you say, these teams are good, these are bad, and then things kind of change. Yeah. Maybe a few of the teams have gotten knocked down a peg, 49ers, Bills. But the other way, I mean, Houston's way better than we thought. Indianapolis is, I mean, once Gardner Minshew starts getting more of a flow, I mean, they're already playing better than I thought they would. And if they can stick around, and I think they will, in a very winnable division, then that's going to be a tougher game. You always thought Minnesota, I mean, that's just the nature of that offense. It would be a tough game. It looked for a while like maybe they were hitting the skids and they were going to be one of the teams that would be in the running for the biggest differential from wins last year to wins this year, but got things turned around last night, beat the 49ers. So that one will be a tougher game than I think maybe we even thought earlier when the schedule came out. Who knows? I mean, maybe Deshaun Watson doesn't come back and that Cleveland game becomes much more winnable in the finale, but that's so far down the road. It is. I wonder what do you think after this week? Because it's a 6 point, it's down to 5.5 now, but after this week, what's the biggest point spread either way, home or a favorite or underdog that you think the Bengals will be looking at in these games?
Yeah, it's hard to say because you could always see injuries like affected down the line. I think when they get to Indianapolis, I think they could be favored pretty heavily over them. Depending on how things go from that. Gardner Minshew, I think, is one of the better backups in the NFL, but once other teams get some film on him and start seeing what he's doing within that Colts offense, we saw him throw some interceptions this past week. I think that could be the one. I don't know. Do you have another one that stands out besides that game?
No, I was just thinking, will this be the biggest one the rest of the year? Will we see another 6 point one? And maybe if Minnesota falls, maybe the Houston one, maybe if Houston loses a couple before they come to Cincinnati, that could be a 6.5, 7 point spread. But
maybe the Steelers, if their offensive issues like really, really start to come to a head, but I feel like those games are always so close that I don't see the spread getting too big in those games.
Yeah, I think we're going to see a lot of 2.5 to 3.5 point spreads the rest of the way.
I think you're probably right. I think you're probably right. It's gonna be tough this week. I think the 49ers in our consensus power rankings up until this past week have been the number one team all season long.
They stayed one after they lost.
They stayed one after they lost. I don't think they're going to be there after last night's game. This is probably a good time for the Bengals to be playing the San Francisco 49ers, I would say. If you picked any point on the schedule, this is a good time. Deebo Samuel's not going to play next week. He's already been ruled out with a hairline fracture in his shoulder, I believe. So that's one piece the Bengals aren't going to have to play. Trent Williams did not play this past week, and we'll have to see how practice goes, but I mean, it seems like he's not going to play this week either. If I had to guess, he was doubtful heading into last week. When you see guys as doubtful, they very often don't play the following week too. So that's huge, especially given that Trent Williams is probably still the best left tackle in the NFL. CMC is banged up, but didn't look like it affected him last night. He took, his usual barrage of carries, scored 2 touchdowns. And Brock Purdy, I think he played well for the most part last night, but had a couple throws get away from him. I think if you could pick a time to play the 49ers, this would be the time. And a short week, of course. They're coming off a short week of rest too.
Mm-hmm.
This is a good time for the Bengals to be playing him. They've got the rest disparity. They've got injuries. The Bengals are pretty much healthy. Orlando Brown sounds like he's going to play at left tackle.
Yeah.
If there's a time to play the 49ers, this is it. And I think the Bengals have to feel good about that, right?
Yeah. I mean, they're still formidable on defense. They don't have a lot of issues on that side of the ball, but Deebo is huge. They were just one dimensional. Even with McCaffrey, they couldn't run the ball very well. And if they don't scare you with that run, then it's much easier to defend Brock Purdy. And he made some nice throws, and he was fun to watch. He's faster than I thought. I haven't watched him super close.
That scramble to the right looked like Lamar Jackson.
Yes.
It's amazing.
I was like, what in the world? And not just fast, but the way he kind of slips and slides. He's got that little bit of pocket
his body a little
like
bit,
Burrow. And but then we saw where a lot of timing routes, and if the timing's a little bit off, it led to a couple easy interceptions for the Vikings. And so I don't think initially you thought this is a game where the Bengals offense has to be right, where it's going to be a shootout and they're going to have to put up 30. And I don't know that that's the case now. I think this could be more of a defensive game and, maybe a field goal game, a big Evan McPherson game. And I don't want to give away too much with the predictions coming up later, but I do. I think this is an ideal time, not just with the rest disparity, but just the fact that the Bengals have been so good. I mean, that was 2 years ago. They went to Vegas and won that game, kind of a gotta have it game coming out of the bye, and then last year they scored 37 at Pittsburgh. I mean, the most they've ever scored in Pittsburgh was 38. That was an impressive win, even though Pittsburgh wasn't a great team last year. So I think this is. It's 100% of the time the bye comes at the right time. I mean, the players tell you can have a week 3 bye. Oh, it comes at the perfect time. They tell you that all the time, but this truly did come at a good time to give them a little extra rest for a long road trip to go to play a quality opponent who's coming off a short week.
Yeah, I would agree. And I think what you said about them being one-dimensional is definitely true, because I think Brandon Ayuk is a very good receiver who has really taken another step this year. But if Deebo Samuel's out, they obviously have George Kittle and McCaffrey in the passing game, but just in terms of wide receivers, I mean, they're pretty thin. Juwan Jennings, Chris Conley, Ray McLeod. I mean, I think that if the Bengals can focus all their attention on Brandon Ayuk, then it's hard to say like, oh, George Kittle and Chris McCaffrey, they can take care of them, but without having another like wide receiver 2 out there, I think it does change the dynamic for the Bengals defense in terms of focusing on one guy. And I think from the Bengals offense perspective, they're going to have to worry about getting the front blocked. Obviously, Fred Warner is everywhere. He is just everywhere. He can do everything. It's unbelievable to watch him week to week in coverage, as a blitzer, everything. But then Nick Bosa up front, Javon Hargrave, they have got to be stout up front. If Burrow's getting like interior pressure all day long, it's going to be a long, long game if Javon Hargrave is constantly in his face. Because I think these corners, Travaris Ward's a good player, but I think these corners can be attacked. I mean, when you have Jamar Chase and T. Higgins on the outside, I think that's the area where you can go after this team a little bit, is maybe take some of those deep shots, maybe, but it's not going to happen if the pressure is constantly at Joe Burrow's face. We've seen that he's been more comfortable maneuvering the pocket, creating these kind of second chance, second reaction plays. But Javon Hargrave, Eric Armstead, Nick Bosa, we mentioned they just traded for Randy Gregory. I mean, these guys can get after it. I think that's going to be an area they really have to be solid as up front.
Yeah, Cleveland Farrell too. I mean, he was what number 9 overall pick, number 10 overall pick. He was
I think 4.
4, yeah. So and he had a couple big plays last night too. Travaris Ward. I mean, I'm pretty sure the Bengals ran him out of Kansas City. Wasn't he the one that got victimized a bunch in Jamar's big game against him in the regular season? And then he's the one that got burned on the Pirine touchdown that really kind of turned that AFC Championship game around in the Bengals' favor. So. But Gibson's a quality safety. They've got elite players.
Hufanga was a first-team All-Pro last year. I mean, he's incredible. And extremely physical. Extremely physical. Like, they are going to get beat up in this game. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if like Jamar Chase or Higgins and Travaris Ward kind of get into a little mix-up or dust-up or something. It's going to be a physical, like, beat-em-up type game, I think.
Yeah, and they're pissed off after 2 straight losses. They're going to feel like they've got something to prove. Bengals are going to be feeling themselves all fresh and rested, and knowing that they're a second half team. And so it could be contentious, and I expect it to be a close physical game throughout.
Yep, I do too. I absolutely do too. Should we get into our predictions and our bets for the week? I think.
Yeah.
I'm kind of curious to see what you think. Usually, I feel like we're on the same page. With how we see these games playing out. I'm curious to see if that happens this week. You want to recap our bets from last week? I know I did not do. I know I missed at least one.
We all sucked.
Yeah. Okay. Good.
it was 0 for 6.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Terrible.
I mean, Brian and I both went Chargers plus 6.5 at Kansas City, and that didn't happen. He took the under on Colts Browns, and it almost doubled that. I tried the parlay. I got 2 of the 3 legs, but I took Detroit plus 2.5 at Baltimore, so that did not work out. You had 49ers minus 6.5 last night, was a loss, and then you had Miami plus 2 on Sunday night, and that was a loss. So, yeah, tough week on the podcast betting front.
Now, we cover football professionally, right, Jay? Right. This is what we're paid to do, is to make these assessments, right?
Those hotels and casinos aren't getting any smaller in Vegas. There's a reason this is hard. Even the best of the best win 55% of the time.
Yes. Okay. My bet for the week, my non-Bengals bet. I'm going to take Atlanta minus 2.5 at the Tennessee Titans.
I like it.
I think Atlanta is better than what they've shown this year. I think Desmond Ridder is. I didn't think he was that good coming into the season, and I know he's thrown a lot of picks and fumbled a lot of balls away, but I think he's been pretty good. Other than those like bag-breaking turnovers, it's easy to say you can just eliminate those, but I do think that could happen against a Tennessee defense that isn't that great, and I think Atlanta's defense is playing really well too. Malik Willis might be starting for the Titans, and we kind of saw how he played at the end of last week's game, completely overwhelmed, no pocket presence whatsoever. So I like Atlanta minus 2.5 at Tennessee.
Now, Brian went the other way on that. He took the Titans plus 2.5, which I think
really,
unless Tannehill plays, I would be on your side of that. Malik Willis. I mean, he just does not look like he
looked okay in the preseason, but.
Yeah,
I mean, he got sacked like what,
people.
4 times on like
a lot of guys selling insurance right now that look good in the preseason.
That's true. Yeah, I just don't see it. If Tannehill plays, maybe, but I don't see it with Malik Willis now.
Yeah. What's your Bengals bet?
Okay, Bengals bet. I'm going to take the Bengals and the points. So the last I saw was 5.5. Right? Is that what you saw? Is it still at 5.5?
Yeah, 5.5.
Yeah, I think it'll be a close game. So I think. With that many points being offered, I don't see these two teams is that big of a spread between these two teams. So I'll take that all day long.
Yeah, I didn't like that spread. So I went teaser. I bumped the Bengals up to plus 11.5 and then took the over under from 46.5 down to 40.5. I want to go over 40.5. Even though I said I think it's going to be a low scoring game, I still think that get both teams in the 20s and you go over 40. So I'm going to do 10 on that one. And then I'm going to go back to my parlay, but I'm going to do a 4-team money line parlay.
Oh, baby.
The Great 8. All 4 of these teams. It's the 4, not the Bengals, but it's the 4:00 games, the Sunday game and the Monday game all have 8-point spreads right now. I'm not going to mess with the points. I'm just going to go Lions, Chargers, Chiefs, Ravens, money line. It's 14 parlay. It only pays plus 141. I would win $14 on a $10 bet, but I need to catch up.
Don't spend it all at once. Don't spend it all at once.
I don't see any of those teams losing. I mean, the Lions are playing a bad Raiders team. The Chargers playing the bad Bears with a quarterback making his second start. Chiefs and Broncos. Chiefs aren't losing. The Chiefs never lose to the Broncos. It's not going to be this week.
So you're willing to bet on Brandon Staley's decision-making in prime time. That's what you're going to bet on. Brandon Staley and the Los Angeles Chargers. All right.
I mean,
we'll see.
He might get fired after that game. Josh
he very well could be
fired after his game against the Lions.
Very well could be.
So, I think the Chargers, they're too good not to win that game.
No,
I agree. Touch that spread of 8, but I'll take the money line.
No, I agree. I think the Chargers are much better than they've looked so far. I can't believe we get to watch Staley in primetime the next 2 weeks. We're very curious on how that goes. Yeah. All right, we'll see how those go.
We got the one of Brian's other bet.
Brian's other bet. I forgot about that one.
He's another grade 8 in prime time. He's taking Tampa Bay plus 8.5 at Buffalo on Thursday night.
Okay. That's interesting. I don't know about that.
I would not lay points with Buffalo at all right now, the way they're playing.
Yeah. That's tough. I mean, Tampa Bay has like the defensive talent to take the ball away from Josh Allen, and he's been giving it away plenty of times. And man, I don't know what's wrong with the Bills. I think the Bills, it's just like, I think we've underestimated those defensive losses.
Oh, yeah.
Matt Milano, Trey White, Daquan Jones. I mean, it's just not even the same Bills defense that we've come used to seeing in the past couple of seasons. It's like literally an almost entirely different lineup out there. So it's kind of hard to assess where they're at right now. Okay, so our picks for this Bengals game. Jay, I have picked the Bengals every week this season.
So have I.
And so have you. And they've made us look like fools at times. They've made us look smart at times. This was, I think, my hardest decision of the year, I think, was picking this game. And I hate to do it, but I'm going to pick the 49ers. I'm going to go San Francisco 27, Cincinnati 23. I think it'll be a close game. We kind of laid out all the reasons. We don't need to hash that out again. But 49ers coming off 2 straight losses. I know everything points to them injury-wise and rest-wise, kind of maybe losing another game in a row here, but I just think they're too talented to lose a 3rd straight game. The Bengals, I think, I could see them having issues with that defensive front, having the pressure get to Burrow. I think it'll be close. I don't think it'll look as bad as any of these early season games have looked, where the Bengals offense just can't do anything. I really don't think that the Bengals are in line for another game like that. I just think it'll be a close game, and at the end, the 49ers will pull it out. So I'm going to go 49ers 27, Bengals 23, as much as I hate to say it.
So I track these in a spreadsheet, and when I was updating after our last pod, I went ahead and put the 49ers in the win column and the Bengals in the loser column for this week, and just figured I'd fill in the score later. But after watching last night, I'm gonna pick the Bengals for a seventh straight time. They've just got the history, the post-bye history. It just feels like there's something building here. Winning 3 out of 4, and I did it with my Seahawks pick, where I threw back to a classic Bengals game and went 27-21. So let's throw this back to a game people would like to forget. Super Bowl 16, which I was in attendance at as a freshman in high school. 49ers beat the Bengals 26-21. I'm just going to flip it, and I'm going to go Bengals 26, Niners 21, with a busy day for Evan McPherson's right foot. 4 field goals.
All right, you're more confident than me, I think. Either way,
delusional.
Or delusional. Who knows? We'll see. We'll see how it goes. I mean, either way, I think we're both seeing a tight game, right?
Yeah.
I think this will be, and maybe the game of the week. I mean, it's not a great slate. I think this is probably the game of the week, of week 8. There aren't a ton of games I'm more, even if I wasn't a Bengals follower, I think this would be the game I'm most curious about.
It is the Jim Nantz and Tony Romo game, which I know drives Bengal fans crazy, but that's another. I have a spreadsheet of who the announcers were for every Bengals game and what the Bengals record is with those announcers, and everybody feels like the Bengals do terrible with Nantz and Romo. They've actually won 4 of their last 6 with that broadcast crew on it. People just remember the AFC Championship game last year as being one of those losses, and they're fed up with Tony Romo, but those big games, the Bengals have come up big in the past.
Definitely. Right. We'll see how it goes. I mean, this is kind of a turning point of the Bengals season, right? I mean, it's not going to be the season is over. The season is saved after this Sunday, but man, it's going to be it is definitely a crux of the season. We'll see. We'll have to see how it goes. We'll be back next week, maybe on Tuesday, maybe on Wednesday. We'll see. We got the trade deadline. We'll see how that kind of works out. But we will be back next week to talk about this Bengals game, whether they win or lose. Make sure you check out all Jay's work on ProFootballNetwork.com, his Bengals coverage. Come check out all our other coverage on Pro Football Network. If you're on YouTube, give us a like, give us a subscription. If you're on a podcast platform, make sure you give us a review. It really does help help us reach other people that want to listen to our podcast. We'll be back next week. Thanks again for listening to the PFN Bengals podcast.